What?
The question is, how could you have handled that Oval Office fiasco better? And the answer never even attempts to be responsive to the question. We have meetings. We had lots of meetings. We've had very productive meetings, many meetings. We've had meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings. Thank you.
Yeah, more meetings. Gotcha. You met with a bunch of people, begged for a bunch of money. How's that going?
Yeah, but let's talk about the fact that you acted like a jackass and shot yourself in the fucking foot in the middle of the Oval Office in front of the world press. I guess it's natural that he wouldn't want to talk about that, but the question was about that, and it makes you look like a fool when you divert away from it that quickly and don't even attempt to respond to it. Yes, and he hasn't even gotten into the part yet where he lectures us about how we have to hate Russia and Russians, which is the part that really chaps my ass, as I told you yesterday. I do not like it when a foreign leader tells me who I have to hate.
Is this where the propaganda starts? So did we start with the propaganda before? I don't know. I didn't have my decoder ring out.
No, it's been pretty tame so far, but still stupid, and it gets worse as we go along. And he gets you can tell that he gets increasingly flustered and unsure of what to say. And I just, as I said before, I don't have any faith in this man's ability to be a broker in negotiating any sort of coherent peace deal. I think he is over his head and beyond his capability. I think they need a leadership change in Kiev.
I don't think he's interested in peace.
No, he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to be accountable to the voters anymore because he's canceled all future elections.
Right. As long as this war continues, he is in charge, and that is the
exactly.
End.
Yep.
And I just want to say that I don't want to say that on YouTube. My bad. Am I permitted to mention NATO at all?
Yes, please do.
So there is something of a concern with the Ukraine joining NATO, and that being, kind of verboten for Ukraine, and how that was all signed off on and agreed to until NATO changed its mind and was like, no, we'll accept them, and then proved that they would. So I'm not so sure who the aggressor is here, because if Ukraine joins NATO, then that puts NATO missiles on Russia's front doorstep. Like within
you are bringing in a new NATO member that is actively at war. So then Article 5 has to be invoked the first day, doesn't it? Or else the treaty doesn't mean anything.
Exactly. It looks like a little dude trying to force the giant's hand.
Yeah, and he wants a I don't know whether you want to call it an off ramp or what you want to call it, but he wants an eventuality, an end to this thing where he gets to continue having his country be a direct surrogate of the United States and the European Union. He wants that money to keep flowing in. He doesn't care what words have to come out of his mouth to make it happen. And since he's no longer accountable to the voters, then that arrangement would pretty much set him up for life, and he's in power, president for life, basically.
El Presidente. You know how that ends.
Por vida. The Constitution of Ukraine says we have elections, doesn't it?
Yeah, I get the impression this man's going to try to salt word salad for the next 4 years.
Yes, absolutely. And then this whole interview is just an exercise in stonewalling, and like we said, running out the clock and saying as little as possible while doing it. But I still, nonetheless, I think it is important that we hear these things directly out of the mouths of the leaders of the countries that are involved in the thing, because I don't think there's a good way to get a functional handle on the situation just by hearing what our media tell us, because our media are idiots with an agenda, and they want us to believe that this thing is. Remember the kindergarten level explanation that Kamala Harris gave of the Russia-Ukraine war last year? Well, Russia is a big country and Ukraine is a little country, and the big country invaded the little country, and that's bad. And that's all the analysis she wants to put into it, and that's all the analysis he wants to put into it.
That's fucking beautiful, dude. If that's not a short, I'm gonna hunt you down.
I'll make that a short.
That should be a short. That was gorgeous, bro. Look, bro, I made Ukraine out of cocaine.
Yeah, and to what Dyatlov just said, he's correct. Ukraine didn't start the war. The 2014 war never ended. And why did the 2014 war start in the first place? Because that's a very crucial thing we have to talk about. It started in the first place because Hillary Clinton and Susan Rice and Toria Nuland decided it would be a fun project to make Ukraine into an outpost of American progressive liberalism. And they decided to do that. And the result was that over a course of years, the Ukrainian people, election after election, they were given a choice between an American stooge and a Russian stooge, and the Ukrainians didn't like that, and that's how the 2014 war started. And that's the invasion that happened in 22 shouldn't be viewed as the start of a new war, but rather a continuation of the one that already existed.
Extant hostilities. Yeah.
Yes. It's cool, guys. Don't worry. I've done my own internal audit, and everything's fine. Just keep sending the money. We're good.
That was a 2-minute tirade of trust me, bro.
Yes, that is exactly what that was. As he's growing increasingly nervous and agitated the whole time, because I can't say anything that causes them to turn off the tap and make the cash stop flowing. It's okay. It's fine. You don't need to do an audit. I did my own audit. I found out everything is cool, so we're good. Just keep sending those checks, baby.
Oh, don't let it stop. Oh.
That's a good frame you froze on. Just look at that face. The words keep coming faster and faster and faster, almost like he's getting more agitated, like he's unsure of what. Well, we've had meetings and meetings and meetings and so many meetings, and our meetings were great, and we had inspectors and audits and say words, keep saying words, just say words. But you know what bothered? I mean, in the entire hour plus of this interview, there's only really about half a dozen questions that Shapiro gets in. He doesn't ask any follow-ups, which is kind of a problem. But there are two questions I would submit, probably the two most serious questions with the most gravity that don't get asked. The first question is, when is the next election? The second question is, what version of peace are you happy with? Neither of those questions get asked or addressed. It's just wild gum flapping at this point.
All right, so 200 billion from us, 150 billion from the UK, 102 billion from France. God knows how much Germany's poured down this fucking rabbit hole.
Well, and did you notice he began answering the previous question about the issue of corruption by saying, "Oh, we've allowed inspectors in, and there's been an audit, and we're fully transparent, and there's reports." That's a lie. There haven't been any reports. We've got a House of Representatives and a Senate full of people who would like to know what happened to all of our money. There haven't been any reports. I don't know what the hell that guy's talking about, unless he's just saying words because he thinks they sound good.
Yeah.
I would love to see these reports he's claiming that exist. I would read them right now.
I got nothing. Yeah, we'd be reading them right now. You're right.
Yeah, exactly.
So
we don't care about your pensioners. Fuck me.
What? How did we end up in the pensioners thing?
Yes, it's a hell of a good question. I have no idea. There was nothing in the question about fucking pensioners. It was, where the hell did our money go?
Is it possible that this pension scheme might have something to do with money laundering?
I would say there's a better than 100% chance of that. Probably 117, 118.
I would have accepted a non-zero possibility.
There is a non-zero possibility. Yeah, that's somewhere in the range of 100%. He's trying to say, without this war, we wouldn't know how to build fucking drones. He said that with a straight face.
Yep.
God, I don't have an adjective for how repugnant that is. But it gets worse. It still gets worse. It gets much, much worse.
So you improved the specifications of some mid-60s weapons.
Yes, he is trying to argue that we have received such a gold mine of intellectual information from funding this war that we ought to be the ones thanking him. I mean, that's actually the impression that one gets here. And God, if you were trying to piss me off, dude, it worked.
That is basically and look at that face.
And also, it shouldn't go without being mentioned that since this interview went live the other day, there's been an additional meeting between Trump and Zelensky at the Pope's funeral, from which Trump emerged not being very confident about how much this guy actually desires a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Because now he's saying he wants total victory, he wants Ukraine's 1992 borders, and he's not willing to accept anything less. And that's madness. That's stark raving madness. That's not what a man says who wants a peaceful settlement.
Right.
That's what a man says who wants a forever war. Yes, we are the lucky recipients of Ukrainian intellectual information.
Has this motherfucker ever heard of paintball?
I don't know. Probably. I mean, he was the Ukrainian Michael Scott. He seems like a guy who might play paintball.
Well, I'm just saying, all of the things he's talking about can be tested in a basic airsoft game.
Well, and he's actually he is making the quite laughable argument that you and I, the U.S. taxpayer, should be fine funding all this stuff in an open-ended fashion with no exit strategy, no off-ramp, no definition of victory, just because we're getting some new drone spec. I mean, how does that benefit you and I, the U.S. taxpayer, I would ask? I don't think it does in any material way, but that's the argument that he has decided to go with. And you can tell Shapiro is getting increasingly agitated here. He's got this look on his face like a man who knows he's having smoke blown up his ass and it's starting to annoy him. Did you hear how he just referred to it? He said, Russia's invasion of the civilized world. That means we, Ukraine, are civilized people. The Russians are not. They're just Asiatic savages, apparently.
I'm getting some tip of the spear, edge of the knife, chest thumping vibes here.
As well you should, because you often do get those kind of vibes from people who are dictators for life, as this man effectively is now, especially if he continues getting the same level of support he's currently getting from the US and the EU. We are setting him up as a permanent dictator.
I don't like
I feel like there should be some kind of pressure to hold something resembling a democratic election here. You set a date for an election at least, and you can't keep permanently using the excuse that, oh, we're at war, we can't have an election. The United States and the United Kingdom both had general elections in 44 and 45 respectively, when they had voters deployed everywhere around the world, and they managed to get the job done with pencils and paper ballots. So you tell me how difficult it is having an election during wartime.
Are you threatening me?
And I'm telling you right now, if it's his intention to hold out for Crimea being Ukrainian, that's a forever war, because that's never going to happen. I mean, they tried to have a little bit of an arrangement with Crimea after the breakup of the Soviet Union, but let's run through the thing again. Sevastopol has been the home port of Russia's Black Sea Fleet since 1750. Consequently, the population of Sevastopol and Crimea more broadly is made up of Russian people who are largely living there to support that navy and that fleet, and it's been that way for hundreds and hundreds of years. After the Soviet Union broke up, they tried to enter into an arrangement where Russia would rent, the southern tip of Crimea where Sevastopol is. But frankly, if we're being honest, the Ukrainians did a pretty piss poor job of living up to the to the terms of that lease, and so that's where you get the annexation of Crimea 10 or 11 years ago.
It's always been a forever war since what, 92 or so.
Yeah.
So,
and even let's go back even farther, because you can't study this and understand it in a meaningful way without trying to have some historical perspective. The boundaries of Ukraine that came into effect with the breakup of the Soviet Union on Christmas Day 1991, they weren't drawn with any regard for the ethnicities of the people who lived in any of the particular regions, like Crimea, for example, or the Donbass or Donetsk or Luhansk. The divisions were drawn purely for the administrative convenience of the Soviet regime. It was never with a mind to this chunk of country might have to one day exist as a sovereign nation state. The lines were just as meaningless as the lines that the British and French drew in the Middle East after the First World War, whose consequences we are still grappling with right up to the present day.
Homie's just saying, trust me, bro.
He is absolutely ruining himself right now, and we are not even to the worst part of this answer yet. The worst part of this answer is when he basically says right out loud, well, I had to ban the Russian Orthodox Church because it's run by the fucking KGB. And he actually unironically uses the term KGB as if there is a KGB, which there isn't. There hasn't been a KGB in 33 years. The Moscow Church. He calls it the Moscow Church.
Yeah, but that Prussian statement. You see, once upon a time there were Prussians.
Yeah, there sure were.
There stopped being Prussians around a particular event what took place not too terrible long ago, and suddenly Prussians
1870.
Suddenly they're Ukrainians, not, or were they Crimeans? I can't remember how that panned out, but Prussia lost everything because some lines on the map got moved.
Well, Prussia just became the hegemon of the newly unified Germany. It used to be that Germany was made up of three kingdoms. You had the king of Prussia, the king of Bavaria, and the king of Brandenburg, and then you had a few dozen little principalities and margravites and electorates and all those little political units that used to exist back in the Middle Ages. And at the end of the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, then they consolidated all of that into a country called Germany, which had never existed up until that point. And the previous king of Prussia became what was called the Emperor of Germany. And there was Wilhelm I and then Wilhelm II, who was the final one. They only had two, obviously, because the monarchy ended when they lost the First War. But yeah, that's how things shook out in Germany.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Is like Prussia ceased being Prussia by their own fault.
But they only agreed to that so that they would be the hegemon of the new country, and their king would be the king of the whole thing,
right?
Or the emperor of the whole thing, as the case may be.
The churches. Well, this is how they have.
Everybody knows that Russia's special services are in control of the church. He just said that out loud. That is his justification for jailing religious clerics and shutting down churches, while also saying that he totally sparkly hearts religious freedom and we're all completely united and all of our churches love each other. You sleazy little douchey little liar.
I could have said it better myself.
He is talking about two concepts that are mutually exclusive of one another. He's saying, well, of course I have to ban the Russian Orthodox Church because it's run by the KGB in Moscow. But he's also saying, I will accept no conditions for peace except a return to Ukraine's 1992 borders, including all of the ethnically Russian areas that are full of Russian Orthodox believers whose residents would rather be Russian citizens. You can't ban their church and keep these people as your citizens with full rights. Those two things cancel each other out, dude. And how can you say this shit out loud without realizing that? That's part of the reason why I find it impossible any longer to take this man seriously as a broker on the world diplomatic stage.
I suspect. All right, well, to begin with, when the war broke out in Ukraine, the very first thing I said was, wait, aren't there a bunch of Russians in Ukraine?
Exactly.
And the was like, yeah, they're going to have to get out. I'm like, but then like 47% of Ukraine? And he just stared.
And aren't we kind of talking about ethnic cleansing at that point?
He stared at me and was like, "Where did you get that number?" I was like, "I don't know. I read stuff, dude." He's like, "I don't know if it's that high." I said, "Yeah, no, it's probably higher if I had to guess. I mean, especially the farther north you get, the farther east you get, the number increases." So like,
yeah, because I'm sorry, I know it's an icky term that people don't like, but there is no way around it. If you are proposing that all people of a certain ethnicity should be ejected from a certain country, there is nothing else to call that but ethnic cleansing.
I can't disagree, but at least he didn't take the previous route, as far as we know so far.
I guess that's something.
It ain't nothing. Did he say that was the law on the mobilization?
He is using the word mobilization a hell of a lot now. And he's using it in several different senses all at once, and it makes it very difficult. I don't know if this is on him or the translator, but it makes it very difficult to ascertain what he's actually trying to say.
Right, okay. All right. Let's not just make...
No, definitely not.
There's nothing there.
No, it is the rhetorical version of tofu. It is only there to take up space and distract you from its own non-existence.
There's no meaning to anything that was just spoken. Yet again he's saying, "Trust me, bro."
Yes, there is a lot of "trust me, bro" here. Oh, I'm your ally. They're your enemy. We're fine, dude. We got this. I did my own internal audit. Your money's all good. Trust me. Take my word for it. We're cool.
Yep.
Just keep those checks coming in. We'll be fine. I'll let you know what victory looks like. I'll get back to you on when the next election is. Just don't worry.
So far, basically what we've gotten to is he doesn't want to answer questions. He gets irritated when people mention money, and think of all the wonderful technology you're going to get from the outdated shit that you sent us that we improved.
He doesn't want to talk about what happens to the money. He doesn't want to talk about religious persecution. He doesn't want to talk about what victory looks like. He doesn't want to talk about when the next election is, which makes it difficult for me to take you seriously as a man who wants to be the shining pinnacle of world democracy.
Right in there.
Yeah, I think part 2 starts there it is. You got it. Yeah, and I'm also fascinated by the questions that weren't asked. It makes me wonder if there were preconditions on the interview. And of course, obviously, it's impossible to know one way or the other, but the interview is taking place after, the Ukrainians have been whining and dining the Shapiro and his crew around Kiev for a couple of days. So traditionally, when during situations like that, you might cozy up to the guy and say, maybe go easy on me in the interview tomorrow. Maybe don't ask me this question or that question. Things like that happen all the time, every day. And often when Western journalists are granted interviews with foreign dictators, preconditions are often attached to it. Like every time freaking 60 Minutes went and interviewed Fidel Castro, there was all kinds of preconditions on those interviews, even though the CBS people pretended there weren't. There were. And I have the same wonder about this one.
So, do you think he's an adequate person?
Seems like
Do you think he's an adequate person?
Absolutely adequate.
Right.
I think he's a heroic person. He's a heroic person.
This may bring into question the veracity of the translation. An adequate person. I'm sure that's a perfect translation for the word from from Russian, but
Ukrainian.
Okay, all right.
Some people don't think there's a difference. I have no dog in that race.
Yeah, I know there is a difference, but it's like the difference between talking to somebody in Tennessee versus talking to somebody in freaking Wisconsin.
Yeah, exactly. It's more dialectical than linguistic, you might say.
Exactly. So an adequate person.
Well, and it's also, I think, a further indication of an interview subject getting flustered when they start trying to turn questions back around on the interviewer. This is the first time we see it happening in this interview, and it happens a couple more times afterward.
Wait, hold on. Let me translate this for you, folks. I just realized what he's saying. I have friends that are Jews. We can't be Nazis.
Yes, we can't be Nazis because I've got a rabbi who's my friend. So boom, bitches.
I know some black guys, so I can't be racist.
Exactly. Some of my best friends are black guys. That is exactly what this is. That is an outstanding call, my friend.
Yes, sir.
With the Nazi talk, we are witnessing a phenomenon that has existed here in our country for some time, but apparently it exists in Eastern Europe also, where in all of our societies somehow, since the end of the Second War, we no longer have any convenient shorthand for what pure evil looks like, except to call people Nazis and compare them to Hitler. It's the only thing we know how to do anymore, and that's too bad, because it never takes the conversation to a useful place. There's been plenty of evil men and evil regimes in history that you could compare modern day events to. It doesn't always have to be Hitler and the Nazis and Hitler and the Nazis. We use Hitler and Nazis today in the same way that for hundreds of years before our time, it was Satan and the devil that occupied that post. When you wanted to make a shorthand reference to pure evil, you talked about freaking Satan or the devil. You didn't talk about Hitler and the Nazis. But as we have become all of our societies increasingly secularized, we have replaced that. And it certainly has not helped our discourse, not one little bit.
You're not wrong. It's been overblasted, overblown, overdone, overused to such an extent that you just said it 37 times in a live stream.
Yeah, Donald Trump can't say or do one single thing without someone saying, "Oh, he's literally Hitler. This is just like the Nazis."
wait a second. We're not fighting the Russians just because they're Russians, but we're fighting because someone who happened to be Russian happened to come and try to force us to do stuff.
Yeah, it's a hell of a thesis.
That there's inequality.
While out the other side of his mouth, he's telling us we have to hate the Russians.
Yeah. No, that's the part I was picking up on exactly.
And if you again, I'm going to revisit the point because it warrants revisiting. If your only acceptable end state is total victory, 1992 borders, then without resorting to ethnic cleansing and mass expulsions, you are going to have to figure out a way for your ethnically Russian citizens to be able to go to their Russian Orthodox church without you throwing their pastors in jail or whatever the hell they're called. Or he's arguing things that are incompatible with one another. And this is not the first example in this interview. There might have been half a dozen. It makes one wonder if he has any sort of coherent philosophy going on between his ears. And I'm not certain he does.
I can't hear a whole lot of coherence in these answers.
And the sentences get more and more fragmented. It's almost sometimes like listening to a Joe Biden interview, like the proverbial kitten chasing the laser pointer. Like your mind just flits from one thought to another thought to another thought and another thought. And you begin 20 sentences in a row and you never finish any of them. And that's the look that he is projecting increasingly as this interview goes on.
Cocaine. Wait.
And look, let's call things what they are. If you were trying to draw the borders of a nation state that primarily encompasses only Ukrainian people, you wouldn't have Crimea in it. You wouldn't have Donetsk and Luhansk and the Donbass. You wouldn't have any of those regions if that was your aim in drawing up the borders, which it was not, as we previously discussed. So Your idea of victory is incompatible with what you say you want your country to be.
He just said out loud that the Russians have done nothing to increase Russian culture. That's what stopped me. Did you catch that bit? What are the Russians doing to benefit Russian culture? Nothing. And I'm like,
well, and just not long ago, he was haranguing the Russians for trying to stamp out the Ukrainian language and Ukrainian national identity. So which one is it?
Both, obviously, because of mental gymnastics. To such a large country that it does not exist.
And this is pie in the sky nonsense. Who cares if they think your country doesn't exist? Your country obviously does exist. So what are we doing here?
Okay, so the question is, do you see a way forward with the lines on the map where they stand today?
Yes, and he does not get a direct response at all.
I feel like he's been playing a lot of tabletop games.
We've got 5 minutes left. Can I briefly throw out a thesis? Here's what I think might ultimately happen with the history of Europe in the 21st century. I'm not going to be around for it, so I won't be here to find out if I was right or wrong. However, much as the history of the 20th century in Europe was about going away from monarchy and toward non-monarchical forms of government, I think the history of the 21st century, to some extent, is going to see a drift back toward monarchy. I think 50 or 75 years from now, you might have a few, maybe more than several countries in Central Europe that used to have monarchies reproclaiming their monarchies, and I think Russia is a candidate for that too, because let's recall what happened in Spain. Spain has a civil war in the 1930s. Franco and the fascists win. Franco rules as the fascist dictator until he dies in the mid-70s. Shortly before his death, everybody expects that he's going to name another fascist dictator as his successor, but he doesn't do that. He says, we're bringing back the royal family. And so we get King Juan Carlos I and since then, King Felipe. I think that might happen in Russia. The dream of Russian nationalism hasn't really changed in the last 800 or 900 years. The dream of Russian imperial nationalism says that if all of the Slavic peoples are united under Russian political hegemony, then the Slavic peoples can be a major world power. Which they actually achieved for about 4.5 decades after the Second World War. But I think Putin is of the mind that the thing that made that fail was communism. But if we could bring back the old Tsarist times, if we could reproclaim the Tsar and go back to a monarchical model, then we might be able to make that model of Russian Empire actually work. And so it would not surprise me. Just as it was a big surprise when Boris Yeltsin brought out Vladimir Putin one day in 2000 and said, this is the guy that's going to succeed me. Nobody had ever heard of this son of a bitch before. And I think Putin might do something equally unexpected when everyone expects him to come out and appoint a successor or an heir apparent or a president in waiting. He might say, we're going to bring back the Tsar. We're going to bring back the glory of Russian imperialism. We're going to achieve everything we want to achieve that we screwed up last time because communism was just too big of an albatross that kept us from realizing the project. That's it for my thesis.
I'm not sure. I don't trust anyone involved in any of it. But
neither.
Two individuals and the translations I've read a few transcripts. I hate to be that guy, but I put more trust in the things that I've read from Putin than I do with Zelensky. Zelensky's like a washing machine and flip-flops whatever he's saying based on whoever he's talking to, and not very well.
Yeah, and Putin does a similar thing that we see Zelensky doing here in terms of just saying lots of words and running out the clock and trying to, avoid many very direct responses. But at least Putin does it in a way that is composed of coherent sentences that follow all along one from the other, and not what Zelensky does, which is just fragment after fragment after fragment, because he's a kitten chasing a laser pointer. And it's a really stark difference, and it makes me take one guy more seriously and one guy less seriously, and I think that's perfectly well warranted.
Yeah, no, I got nothing against none of that. None of it. I mean, it's like I said, it's freaking, you got two people to choose, and you got two people to choose from, and only one can be the one you support. And that's it. Who do you trust?